So I think we're ready now. Good. Okay. Yeah, like Alyssa said, so most of my training is coming from a Vaganova background. I was trained by Nicholas Macatelli and then went on to train with Gelsey Kirkland. And while I was with Gelsey Kirkland, her emphasis on port de bras, I think the Vaganova training has really good training in port de bras in general, but it really enhanced my understanding of um, the importance of strength and mobility in how our not only our upper body moves, but how it affects the rest of our body as well. And I think that in a lot of resources that are available today, there's a lot of things on how to get better feet. There's a lot of things on how to get better turnout. There's a lot of things on how to improve your core, but there's just really a lack of resources on how to train your upper body properly. So I'm really excited to talk and just share with you what I've learned. And hopefully in the future, there will be more work on this just in general in the dance community. But there's a lot of material that I have to get through today. So I'll try to stop a couple of times and ask questions throughout. But yeah, just make sure to write them down or keep note of them, and then we'll try to get to them as we go through. So let me share my screen with you all. Okay. So I always like to start by talking about why why are we talking about what we're talking about. And I like this quote from, this is a resource that I use a lot, from Jackie Green-Haas in the book Dance Anatomy. She talks about the focus in finding efficiency of movement within the shoulder complex through shoulder stability. Once you understand the coordination of arm movement with the upper body, your shoulders will be more secure, so your arms, elbows, and wrists can move freely with style and grace. So I think that hits on just, there's a really important balance of stability in being able to have freedom in the upper arms. If we don't have the stability in our shoulder complex, we're going to have a really hard time having that free mobility and not rigidity in the shoulders. Oh, I don't know why that's beeping at me. There we go. So kind of an overview of our discussion today. So the purpose of talking about port de bras and improving our port de bras is to be able to move our arms more freely with specificity and control. And that has a huge contributing factor to our ability to have expressive movement and the artistry of dance. And so I think, you know, that what differentiates us from a sport or something that's competitive like that is our ability to have that artistic expression. And I think port de bras and the movement of our upper body is where I think a majority of that happens. So it's very important to the artistic intent behind what we're doing. It helps us to achieve that dancer look of like the long neck, open chest, and a look of freedom to our dancing. And then really importantly as well, it helps to prevent injury. So we're looking out for the overall health of our dancer. So it's not just a look thing, it's a very functional thing, and it's also a safety thing. So our outline kind of the discussion, we're gonna talk about the need for balancing mobility and strength in the upper body to achieve that sense of plasticity. And then we're gonna focus on 3 areas of the body, excuse me, and their influence on port de bras. Sorry, our allergies are starting back up here again in San Antonio. So we're going to talk about the rib cage, the shoulder girdle, and the arm below the shoulder through, our wrists and hands. Okay, so the best resource that I found that had so much information, or the most information, was a book called Inside Ballet Technique by Valerie Grieg. And so I highly recommend that if you're wanting more resources, but I thought this quote of hers was really good. She says, "If I had to pinpoint a single preventable fault in otherwise well-trained dancers today, it would probably be the alignment of the rib cage. The protruding rib cage seen in so many ballet students and even in some professional dancers makes some degree of rigidity a foregone conclusion. This false position also distorts the spine, shortens the muscle of the back, disturbs the important relationship of the ribs to the pelvis. It is frequently accompanied by a strained high chest, thrust back shoulders, stiffened neck, and tense contracted muscles. So if we think, I can stand up and give like a little demonstration of our rib cage. A lot of dancers in an attempt to open their chest, rather than really opening the front and the sternum and the shoulders, will do this, right? So they're pushing the rib cage forward and they're lifting the chest up, and it really creates a lot of tension in the back and in the neck muscles, because our spine is not in an alignment that it was built to be in for stability. So we still need to maintain that neutral spine, right? We don't, as dancers, our spine is a little bit more straight in the placement than a normal person's, but we still want to maintain a little bit of the lower curve and a little bit of the upper curve in our spine. And the chest opening, rather than being opening from the ribs, right, is to have a gentle lift of the sternum. So it's just the top 3-4 ribs that are having this lift. And there's a sense of the rest of the ribs are able to continue to slope downwards. And I feel also a lift in my upper back. So rather than here and my upper back is sort of sloping backwards, there's a gentle lift in the upper back and a lift in the sternum. So there's a sense that the entire chest is expanding and not just the front of the ribs. So I think as teachers, we have to be really careful when we use cues like pull up, because a lot of our students think pull up and then they'll do that, right? So I think it's really important to be specific about where we're pulling up. I always tell dancers to pull up the front of their hip bones as a cue for the placement of their pelvis. But I think better cues for the rib cage are things that encourage the expanding of the entire rib cage or back, rib cage, both front and back. And also things like lift the torso away from the hips. So you're thinking about the entire rib cage lifting vertically rather than one spot opening. I do think that there's an important sense of opening the collarbones. So I'll tell the dancers to open the collarbones, but I'll never tell them to pull up or lift higher this way, because it just gives a sense of this rather than a proper lengthening of the spine. So yeah, when we're constantly in this position and we're straining the muscles of the upper back, we'll talk more about it later, but it kind of inhibits some of the stability muscles in our shoulders. And it also creates really tense necks, because in this position, I'm having to strain these muscles to keep my neck in alignment and happy. If I'm here, I can really relax my neck and it's easy. And I have that ease of movement through my shoulders and neck. I think also when students start to find this correct position of the rib cage, they're often like, how do I breathe like that? And I think it's because there's just such a habit of standing in that really protruded position where the back muscles are so tight that most ballet students in general breathe into the top front part of their chest this way. And we really need to be able to teach our students to breathe through their whole rib cage, to expand their ribs from the side and the back and not the top front of the chest, as well as breathing from their diaphragm. A lot of dancers have a really hard time doing that because their stomach muscles are so tight, but it's good to have them be able to explore different ways of breathing. There's a few ways that you can teach this. You can have the students lay down. I think this is the best place to start, to lay down, to place hands on their belly, and first figure out how they can breathe into their belly. And you're always really breathing from your diaphragm, but I guess it's just where the air is kind of expanding into. So really having the students feel their hands rise and fall with the rise and, of their breath on their belly. And then you have them put their hands on their chest. And they do the same thing where they're feeling the rise and fall of breath into the front and top of their chest, which is usually more comfortable for them. And then you have them feel the sides of their rib cage and breathe. I think I adjust my camera. Breathe so that when they're breathing, sorry, my sunlight today, because of the time change, is like hitting in a weird spot. Let me try this. be better. Okay, so when they're breathing, they're going to expand sideways into the ribs that way. Right? And then you can also have them laying on the back. Well, they're already laying on their back, but feeling like they're breathing with the back of their ribs expanding into the floor. And sometimes it takes students a little while to kind of figure that out and find how they can breathe in different parts of their rib cage, but it's really important. After they've sort of mastered that, you can have them take a TheraBand. This one might not be quite long enough. And wrap it around their rib cage this way, and then have them breathe into the TheraBand, trying to expand sideways and backwards. And that gives them just a little feeling of resistance so they can really feel their breath that way. I think it's also really important that any cross-training exercises that we do should also aim to incorporate correct placement of the rib cage. So if we're lying on the floor, a lot of students who are used to kind of protruding the rib cage, the back of the ribs won't touch the floor. So it's really important to make sure the back of the ribs are touching the floor. There's a little bit of space for our lumbar curve in the lower back, and that the front of the pelvis, the two hip bones, 2 points of the hip bones in the front and the pubic bone are in a flat triangle. So we're really maintaining neutral spine in the pelvis, but also in the rib cage. And then also to reinforce good breathing techniques. So when they're breathing and doing their exercises, particularly if they're in like a crunched or rounded position, is a really good opportunity to work on that breathe into the back, because they can't breathe into the front of their body really well. So I think that the more we incorporate it into our cross training and different exercises like that, the more that they're going to hang on to it when they get to ballet class. Okay, so next we're going to talk, let me pause actually. Do you guys have any questions about the rib cage placement, breathing, any of that stuff? Okay, cool. We'll keep going. The next thing we're going to talk about is the shoulder girdle. So the main bones that make up the shoulder girdle are the clavicle or collarbone, your scapula, your humerus, and all those connections make up our shoulder girdle. The joints involved are the glenohumeral joint. So that is the joint when we think of the ball and socket joint. So the socket is called the glenoid cavity, and your humerus, so glenohumeral joint, is that ball and socket shoulder joint. The other one is the scapulothoracic. So that's the joint between the scapula and the back of the rib cage, and that kind of sliding motion, that's also considered a different joint in our body. So scapula thoracic is our rib cage. We're going to talk about a couple of different muscle groups, the rotator cuff muscles, the muscles that stabilize the scapula, and then the glenohumeral muscles that act on the glenohumeral joint. Whoop, so for some reason it keeps going 2 at a time. There we go. Okay, so our rotator cuff is made up of 4 pretty small muscles called your supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis. So the supraspinatus is here. It's kind of over the shoulder here and attaches kind of from here and goes back to the top of our shoulder blade. The infraspinatus muscle, actually, I don't think there's a picture here. It's under, oh no, here it is. Yep. It's right here, kind of across the shoulder blade. So this is looking from the back view. Then we have the teres minor, which is underneath the infraspinatus. And then we have the subscapularis muscle, which is on the front side of the scapula. So kind of between your rib cage and the scapula on the underneath. The function of the rotator cuff muscles are to stabilize the shoulder joint. So, and to help it rotate in the socket. So each time you rotate the humerus in the socket. They're working to stabilize kind of that ball and socket joint so it doesn't lift up and end up pinching the acromion, which is a process on the end of your clavicle, is the acromion process. So if we don't have proper muscles working there when you lift, and I have a student actually who's working this right now, she can't lift her arm very high or in a proper position without it pinching in the top of her shoulder, and that's a problem with the rotator cuff muscles. So yeah, if we have weak muscles here, we have kind of an instability in that shoulder joint and also can cause some pinching. It's one of those things that I think, unless it's wrong, you don't kind of realize that those muscles are working so well to help your body move properly. And when they're not working, it's painful. So we're going to move on then to the stabilizers of our scapula. So we have our upper, lower, and middle trapezius. I should have said upper, middle, and lower trapezius in order, but that's okay. So the upper trapezius is kind of this, if you look on our diagram, right, it's this kind of diamond muscle here. So it has all these different fibers, so it can act in a lot of different ways on our scapula. So I'm sorry, I don't know why it keeps doing that. These upper trapezius muscles, so that's kind of here, we think these muscles are often really tight. They elevate the shoulders this way. The middle and lower fibers bring the scapula down and in, right? They kind of help flatten that inside edge of the wing, we call winging scapula, right, against the back a little bit, and help to pull the scapula down. Then we have our levator scapula and rhomboids, which elevate and downwardly rotate the scapula. I have a next slide that shows the different movements of the scapula, which I think is really helpful, but basically elevate is going this way, and then our shoulder blade has an ability to rotate upward and downward. So it's when we like lift our arm up to third, or if you call it fifth position, there's a rotation of the scapula up, and as it comes down, it downwardly rotates. So the rhomboid is in charge of that downward rotation. In an antagonistic relationship to the rhomboid, so it means it has an exact opposite function, is the serratus anterior. And this muscle is really cool. It's like little fingers that goes around kind of the side of your rib cage. You can see it here underneath kind of the shoulder blade, and it kind of wraps around to the front of the body. This muscle is in our pectoralis minor, which I'm not sure if I have in this picture actually, but it's a smaller pec muscle in the very front, kind of here, deeper. Those two muscles work to upwardly rotate the scapula, as well as pull the scapula forward. So you kind of can have this forward motion and pull of the scapula along the rib cage. I don't know if you can see in my shirt very well, but it does a lot of work in stabilizing the scapula. It's one of the most important muscles. We'll talk about it a lot more. But it also abducts, which means helps to lift the arm up, and internally rotates. So winging, what we call winging, is that kind of like when our students have that edge of their shoulder blade or the corner of their shoulder blade poking out, is related most times to a weakness in the serratus anterior and the lower trapezius. So kind of the muscle that pulls the shoulder blade down and in, as well as the muscle that's responsible for that kind of pulling forward and stabilizing. Because there's this antagonistic relationship between the serratus anterior and rhomboids, habitually contracted rhomboids. So when we have dancers that stand like this, and these muscles are really tight between their shoulder blades, if those are habitually tight, they can counteract the serratus anterior and even interfere with its ability to act on the scapula. And I don't know if I pointed out the rhomboids and levator scapula. The levator scapula is here, and then our rhomboids are kind of between. Those are like, if you look on like Swimmers, I feel like, have them a lot. They're like those little butterfly muscles that sort of appear um, in the back. Okay, so I liked this diagram, was really helpful for me to view all the different ways that the scapula can move. It's really a complex joint. And so they can elevate, which is lifting just your shoulders up. They can depress, which is the shoulders going down. They can adduct, so they can squeeze together, and they can abduct, which is coming apart, which is part of what that serratus anterior is responsible for. And they also have upward rotation. So if you think about moving the arm up, the scapula, and you can feel your scapula actually is going to rotate out slightly. And then when you come down, it has a downward rotation. The last set of muscles we're going to talk about is the glenohumeral muscles. So we have the pectoralis major, which is what you think of as your pec muscle, that big muscle in the front of your chest that pulls the arms forward and together. We have the deltoid, which has, excuse me, different fibers like the trapezius as well, and it can move our arm to the front, it can move our arm to the side, it can move our arm to the back. So I think it's anterior, middle, and posterior fibers. I should have written that down. But it has 3 kind of different sets of muscles, like the trapezius has those, different fibers. And then we have the coracobrachialis, which is a small muscle. Deeper underneath. It's right here, just this little one. And it's responsible for flexion of the arm. And then we have the latissimus dorsi, which is this picture at the bottom. It's kind of like this bat wing muscle that connects your humerus to your spine. And so the latissimus dorsi is really important in adduction, bringing the arm down, in internal rotation, in extension, so taking the arm to the back, and depression of the humerus. So if you think of kind of that bone kind of moving down into the socket. Okay, so now understanding all this anatomy, there's some kind of important things that we need to think about. So tightness in the pectoralis major muscles, the upper trapezius, so the pec muscles here in the front, the upper trapezius, these kind of muscles in the back, top of your back and neck, and the rhomboid muscles, those muscles between the shoulder blades, can be really counteractive to proper shoulder mechanics. And we have a lot of students, I think nowadays, because of technology too, and we're on our phones and we're on our computers so much, like this is just becoming a lot more of a common position to sit in. So that kind of upper trapezius is already tight. I think the rhomboids come from this like over protruding of the rib cage and extension of the back that doesn't need to be happening all the time. So they just get overused and over tight. And the pec muscles as well is like kind of this, when you have this like rounding forward of the shoulder bones that we see in some dancers and people. I think also it's like that phone thing, as well as some other issues can contribute to that, but tightness there can really inhibit proper shoulder mechanics. In addition, weakness in the stabilizing muscles, so those scapular stabilizing muscles and the rotator cuff muscles, can also lead to injury and improper shoulder mechanics that lead to stiff and rigid port de bras. So if our arm is not stable in the socket and we're kind of moving the whole joint and elevating the shoulders, right, that's going to make our port de bras look really rigid. So a concept that's really helpful to teach students and just to understand as a teacher as well is that 2/3 of your movement as your arm goes from next to your side over your head, 2/3 of the movement comes from the glenohumeral joint. So it happens within the actual ball and socket joint. So you should have about 2/3 of the movement should be able to come from that shoulder without anything else happening. And the last third of the movement comes from the scapulothoracic. So we need to have strength in that scapulothoracic joint to stabilize so it doesn't just fly up as soon as we lift our arms. But I think also we have to recognize that there is a movement of the scapula. It doesn't stay still. So sometimes telling these students not to move their shoulders can result in like really stiff, and they'll try to just pull and lock their shoulder blade down and they can't actually get their arm all the way up. So we need to have this awareness that our shoulder blades are doing that outward rotation as the arm comes up. So yeah, I think there's when there's an improper functioning, the shoulder will elevate this way. So when the arm comes up, the shoulder will elevate. What we want it to do is be able to have that upward rotation. And I don't know if you can, let me see if I can show you in my, I think my shirt is tight enough. But so rather than this raising the arm and this happening where the whole shoulder joint comes up, we start with a movement in the arm, and then we have that outward rotation of the shoulder blade. So there's a real wideness in the back and the openness in this part of our shoulder that allows that movement to happen. Could you see that clearly? Okay. Okay, so like we were talking about before, we have this antagonistic relationship between the serratus anterior, so these like finger-like muscles, and the rhomboids, the muscles between our shoulders. And those muscles are assisted by so the serratus anterior is assisted by the lower trapezius, and the rhomboids are assisted by the latissimus dorsi. So proper functioning of the serratus anterior is crucial in the mechanics of all arm movements. And like we've said several times, tight rhomboids can impede the functioning and result in tight, rigid, and elevated shoulders. And that's a quote from Inside Ballet Technique again. Tightness and overuse of the upper trapezius fibers, so these muscles in our neck, also can impede proper mechanics. This muscle is really like a tension holding muscle and a stress holding muscle. So not only like stress from our life, if we're feeling stressed out, a lot of times we'll feel this like kind of tension in our shoulders, but it also shows up from a poor placement. So if we have a poor alignment in our neutral spine, if we have kind of that tension, that extra tension will often show up in the trapezius muscles. So if we have students with really tight trapezius muscles, we really need to be looking at their placement as well. And then also talking to dancers about, where do you hold your stress? Where do you feel your stress? Can you feel yourself relax your shoulders during the day? If you feel that stress can be really helpful in combating that tightness. So correct functioning of the shoulder girdle should minimize the use of the deltoid muscle. So if we have this greater stability in the shoulder joint and in the rotator cuff, the muscles that are actually moving your arm up, front, and back shouldn't have to work as much. And so if we have that overuse of the deltoid, we'll kind of bulk up in those muscles a little bit. We're not lifting weights, so they're not going to be like hugely bulky because we're just lifting the weight of our own arm, which is not very heavy. But sometimes if you see dancers with like more bigger shoulders, we want to look at their scapular stability and if they're building too much muscle here. Let's see, where was I? Tightness in either of the pectoralis muscles. So the pectoralis major, which is the top one, or that little one underneath the pectoralis minor, can result in difficulty in arching the spine. So if we have students who have that difficulty finding that kind of cambre in their upper back, or they have this kind of rounding of the shoulders forward, we probably need to work on opening these pec muscles. So in a neutral position, our scapula should sit flat against the rib cage, and should have a broad feeling in the upper back. So the cue I found most helpful, rather than pull your shoulders down, is to feel like your shoulders are going down and out. So we have that serratus anterior working, and the shoulder blades, rather than just kind of pulling down, will go down and expand in the back. So they're really wide in the back. I I think I can, if you guys can look again, see if I can show you. So like in second position, sometimes dancers will hold their shoulders in this way. We really want the shoulders to go down and out so that the shoulder blade is really wide and sitting flat against the rib cage. And I have a little bit of scoliosis, so it's not maybe the best example in my shoulders because my rib cage is a little funky, but hopefully you guys could see that kind of out. So when the arms move up and down, again, the scapula should glide flat against the rib cage. So we shouldn't have any winging or pinching together. So when the arm is lifting up and down, the shoulder blade should remain completely flat against this rib cage. And when we come down, we shouldn't have any pinching together. Students should also be able to, oh my goodness, where did we go? Wrong direction. Hold on. I'm sorry, guys. My mouse is like very sensitive if I tap it the wrong way. There we go. Yeah. Okay, so I think this is where we were. No, one more. Okay, students should also be able to raise, like we were talking about, their arms the first 2/3 of the movement from the glenohumeral joint and just the last third from the scapulothoracic joint. There's a really good exercise that I like that helps students to find this proper placement of the shoulder blades in the first and second position. So what you're going to do is take the hands together in a prayer position and bring the elbows up to your shoulder height, and then turn the fingers toward your chest. And then you're going to move the fingers down. The goal is, this is also helps to stretch out some of the fascia and things that we need to stretch. The goal is to get the fingers down to the belly button eventually. So they won't be able to usually get there at first, but keeping the shoulders back to lower the hands as low as they can. And then you're going to take the shoulders and roll up, down, back, and out. Up, down, back, and out. And that placement of your shoulder blades should be pretty much the same as first position. So you can have them do that exercise and then just rotate the lower arm, keeping the upper arm where it is and the scapula where it is. And sometimes that can help them to find that good placement of the shoulder blade. And the placement of the shoulder blade in first and second is very similar. I think in second position, maybe it even gets a little bit wider in the back. Okay, before we move on, do you guys have any questions about the scapula and movement from the scapulothoracic joint?
You had said that winging shoulder blades are usually caused by weakness in the serratus anterior, and what was the other muscle?
The serratus anterior and the lower fibers of the trapezius muscle, that diamond muscle.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. So make sure, it's hard for me to see my chat in this view. So if you have a question in the chat, just feel free to unmute yourself and ask it, because it's not showing up right now for me while I'm sharing my screen for some reason. But that's okay. When we have, okay, so then moving on, talking about our upper arm, lower arm, wrist, and hands, the exact placement and shape of the arms are really dictated by style. So the Vaganova aesthetic is very different from Ballantine aesthetic and that kind of thing. So I'm not really going to talk so much about that, but these are some general guidelines for that work for all styles of ballet. So in any position, we want the arms to be set slightly in front of the body. So in preparatory position, for example, the elbow is not back, but it's slightly forward. And then we're working on opening from this joint. So again, if we have students who have really tight pec muscles, they're going to have a really hard time holding. That's going to look more like this rather than the shoulder opening, the scapula going out and down, and then the elbow, the upper arm being able to internally rotate for that position. First position is obviously in front of us. Second position should also be slightly in front of the shoulder. A lot of times I'll get students doing this to try to open the shoulders. And what I'm really doing is just pinching the shoulder blades together rather than going out. So keeping the arm in front and reaching a little forward and out is really helpful. Even if the arm opens slightly more to the side in some styles, it should never be behind the body. It should be really a little bit forward. So let's see. And then in third position as well. Some styles will bring the third position a little bit more back. But I think keeping an so when we'll talk about that in a minute, but especially when we're teaching students who are young and we're working on this shoulder placement and we're not wanting them to overextend in the rib cage, it's really helpful to start with the arms here. And then if the style dictates that we need to open it up, then we can open it up once they have the flexibility and strength to do that. But starting the arm a little bit forward is really helpful no matter what aesthetic you're going for in the end. So the arms have a set of opposing rotations when the arm is at or below the shoulder level. So the most helpful way for me to think about it and understand it as a ballet person is to think of my shoulder going en dehors. My upper arm is going to rotate en dedans, and my lower arm is going to rotate en dehors. So there's these opposing spirals that are happening in your arm. So I'll say that one more time. Your shoulder is going en dehors, the upper arm is going en dedans, and the lower arm is going en dehors. So we have that kind of opposing spiral in the arm that helps to create that really long line. When the arm goes above second position, the upper arm is going to start to have, rather than internal rotation, it's going to start to have external rotation. So it does change a little bit from here. I think that's why it's really hard for students when they're coming from third to second, because they have to switch that rotation of the upper arm to the internal rotation. That's why we get a lot of this elbow thingy, right? It's just they're not switching from the external to internal rotation. When we're working with the arms, we need to make sure that we're setting them on a foundation of a neutral spine, correct rib placement, lowered shoulders, long neck, and then we're achieving movement without strain in the shoulders or the neck. If we are seeing that kind of strain in our students, there's other things we need to address to make sure that they can move their arm freely. But if we kind of build that foundation of neutral spine, rib placement, and the shoulder scapular stability, then we should be able to move the arms a lot more freely and without a lot of tension in the arms and shoulders. We talked about this as well, that as the arms move from up to third or fifth position, there needs to be an upward rotation of the scapula and not an elevation of the scapula. So the shoulder blade does move, but it's in an upward rotation rather than an elevation. As well, there should be no displacement of the rib cage. So I'll often tell my students, as the arm comes up, to kind of draw the ribs down to reinforce that kind of lengthening of the back of the spine and sloping down of the bottom of the ribs. It doesn't mean we're closing, obviously, the collarbones, but kind of feeling that drawing down of the lower ribs can help maintain the rib placement as the arm goes up. I have so many students who are tight in some of these muscles that I'm working with right now in San Antonio that, right, we see this because they just don't have the flexibility to open in that shoulder joint or the scapular stability, right, to move the scapula the right way. So they end up compensating in the rib cage. Oh. Okay. So now we're going to move on to several, let's see, what time is it? Yeah, we'll try to get through as many of these as we can. Exercises for mobility, and then we'll talk about some exercises for strength. And I'm just going to take a pause for a second because I'm going to try to move my camera to a better spot. My computer was not working this morning. So just take a pause, think about any questions you have. You can grab a drink of water if you need it really quick, and then we'll come back in just a second. That's okay. I think I can just adjust here. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. So the first exercise we're going to talk about for mobility is actually just a neck massage. And I got this from Lisa Howell's Front Splits Fast. If you've taken any of the other instructor insights, you know how much I love Lisa Howell. She's wonderful. But this basically, you would want a little bit of cream. And we won't do the full massage today. I'll just give you the gist of it. But you're just going to start by massaging over the trapezius muscles. So kind of going this way. Yeah. And spend some time there. Then you can have your students kind of go up the neck muscles that run along the next to the spine. So going up all the way into the base of their hairline, right this way. You can spend some time doing that. And then you can also have them, this muscle here in the front is, we didn't talk about it, but your sternocleidomastoid, and you can have the massage here in the front. Yeah. And then, yeah, so it's kind of, you have to turn your neck to the side a little bit. And then the next place you want to have the massage is you want to go up and you want to find where they're, the very bottom of their skull, there's kind of two little knobs, and they're just going to take their thumbs and massage there. So you can also spend some time there. You can go up, and then there's another kind of ridge of bones as you move up the skull, and that is another muscle attachment site. You can have the massage here. Spend some time there with their thumbs. And then you can have them, I won't do it too much because it won't mess up my hair, but you massage the scalp with their fingers, and then as well as their temples. And this actually is going to help improve the fascial system for our vertebra, but also for the rest of your body, and can really help with that, things like hamstring flexibility. So this is, neck massage is just a helpful overall thing. The next one that I have is an isometric neck stretch. So you're going to take your hand on the opposite side of your head and tilt your head about 50% of the stretch. You don't want to start in your full stretch. So you're going to go about 50% of the way, and then you're going to press against your hand. So you're going to try to tilt your head back to straight, but you're going to resist it with your hand, and you hold that for 8 counts. And then you relax and just relax the muscle, stretch a little bit further, and then press and hold 8 counts again. And then you can relax a little further. So you do it 3 times with the head directly side, and then you can tilt the head in slightly towards your nose, toward your armpit, and you can place the hand behind your ear a little bit and then pull back into the hand. And it's, again, 8 counts, and then you can relax for 8 counts and kind of stretch over. But that's a really good, nice stretch for those muscles, especially if they have a hard time letting go. You want to make sure students are really contracting to try to tire out the muscle, but when they release, they really are breathing and relaxing and letting the muscles go. So I wouldn't recommend doing that with students who are too young and don't know how to kind of mentally relax the muscles yet, but with older students, that one can be really helpful. So another stretch you can do for the pec muscles is going against a wall, and you can do one of 2 ways. You can give the wall a high five this way, with the elbow start with the elbow at the shoulder, and then you're gonna just walk and open slightly this way. We have someone jumping into our call. Okay, so you're gonna walk slightly open and stretch the shoulder joint this way. You can also do it with the arms slightly up or slightly down, and you'll get different fibers of the pec muscle. You can also do this stretch opening the hand, really open the hand wide, turn it backwards this way, and then stretching open. You want to do it again at shoulder level at first, and then you can do it higher or lower. When you're doing this stretch, it's really important that you don't let this happen in your shoulder, that you're keeping that down and out feeling, so you're really opening the pec muscles properly rather than letting the shoulder elevate. It's also really important to work the mobility of our thoracic spine and stretch, especially if those rhomboid muscles are tight, stretch between there. So doing things like cat and cow. And when our students are doing cat and cow, and I'm really not a great example of this because my scoliosis limits the ability of my thoracic spine to move a little bit. But we want to really make sure that students aren't doing cat and cow in their lower back only. We really want to make sure they're going through the thoracic spine. They have an entire curve, and then they're really curving in the thoracic spine when they go here and stretching between the rhomboid muscles. Thread the needle, so that's this one where you reach up to the ceiling and reach through. Can also be a good stretch for those muscles in the back. Another really nice one that I like is placing the arm on a, let me just go back a little bit, upper diagonal, and you cross the fingers through. Let me show this hand. Maybe you can see a little better. And you pull back like this. So you're getting a stretch in one side of the upper back, and then you pull back on the other side. Rolling through, what did I mean by that? Oh, that's just having them even sit or stand against a wall and working on trying to peel one vertebra at a time off the wall and really rounding in their thoracic spine. Also, just having them pull this way and stretch between the shoulder blades if their rhomboids are tight can be helpful. Also, having them kneel and do mobility exercises like from behind their head, rounding the spine forward and then arching in the upper back. This is a really good thing to do in their warm-up to get those little muscles in the thoracic spine and the joints really mobile. Okay, so stretches across the body over the shoulder. Oh, yeah, just in general, I'm sure we've all done these in our dance career. These stretches where you take the arm across the body and you take it over the shoulder. Those are really great stretches for those deltoid and muscles here underneath. Another really good stretch, more for the fascial system, is to take your hand, and I call this the peeling the banana stretch. You push, take your hand into flex position. You open your thumb as wide as you can. It is really important when students do this that they don't kind of sit back in their rib cage, but you're going to have them reach their arm forward and pull their fingers back without doing this or dropping back, right? Keeping the rib cage in nice placement. And it stretches some of the fascial systems for the arm and upper body. Especially you want to make sure that their thumb doesn't start to curl or go in. Keeping this thumb open is really crucial to that stretch. Another great one is to do a stretch, and they can do this with or without a yoga block, depending on how tight they are at first, but let me move my camera down just slightly so you can see better. You're going to start with the elbows, kind of like how you would start for like a dolphin or something if you take yoga. You put your hands together and you're going to sink the chest. You're going to try to sink the chest through to the floor. Some students might need to do it on a yoga block so they can get a little bit more deep into the stretch this way. Another good one for the fascial system is you're going to make this funny, like I call it the bear claw hand, where you're going to take your fingers in and your knuckles are flat. So we're not doing this or extending. We're trying to keep the knuckles completely straight and just bend the fingers in. So this is another like one of those things that's pulling on the fascial system. And then you're opening the thumb as wide as possible. And so you take those arms and you're going to do little circles back this way on the or. You're trying to externally rotate the arms as far as they can go. You can see my right arm can go a lot further than my left arm. And then you're going to internally rotate and do the same. Externally rotate, do 8 circles on the or, and then do 8 circles on the don. And then you're going to internally rotate and do the same thing. Circles one way, and then 8 circles the other way. Another one we can do for mobility, especially once the students have gained some understanding in their scapular stability, is taking a TheraBand and correct placement of the rib cage, feeling their scapular stability, taking the arms up and over all the way around, keeping the shoulders fairly still and just feeling that upward rotation as the arms go up and down and trying to displace the rib cage as little as possible. That kind of like dynamic stretching, I feel like can be really helpful to get more fluidity once they have that stability in their rib cage and scapula. Okay, so exercises for strength. So those serratus anterior muscles that are those weak, really weak muscles, there's a couple of things that you can do. So the first one, actually I'm gonna move my camera up, is you're gonna have them stand against a wall with their shoulder blades in neutral. And you can kind of have their feet step back so there's a little bit of pressure into the wall. And then you're gonna have them rotate the scapula around using the serratus anterior and then come back to neutral. And push the wall away and come back to neutral. And hopefully you all can see that. But basically the shoulder blades are moving out and around the back and then coming back together. Out and around the back and coming back together. Similarly, you can have them do what I call a modified push-up, which is have them do it on their hands and knees, but they're basically going to be doing the same action. So they're going to push the floor away and just move the shoulder blades down and out and then come back to neutral. You can't even have them bring the shoulder blades, squeeze them together if their rhomboids aren't already too tight. So they're going through the full range of motion all the way out and then squeeze the shoulder blades together. And you don't have to do very many of those till they feel pretty tiring. The next one is rowing. So you're gonna take a TheraBand, put it over the feet like that, and cross it. And then really, again, paying attention to the proper placement of the rib cage and the proper placement of the shoulders. You're going to pull the elbows back this way. So you're using the triceps, you're using the muscles to stabilize the scapula. So you would do like 8 holding for 3 counts or 4 counts at a time. And then you do 3 sets of that, 3 sets of 8. And then we also want to take the arms up to the side, shoulder level. So we're using a little bit different muscle fibers. I also really like to have students, when they're doing this on the return, make sure that they're not collapsing in the shoulders. So they're starting with the collarbones open, proper rib placement. They're going into the position, and then as they come back, they're maintaining and eccentrically lengthening without losing the placement of the scapula and the shoulders. We have, with a weight, a small hand weight or can of soup or something, you can have students do V's. So again, watching the proper rib placement, watching that the scapula is upwardly rotating rather than elevating, keeping the arms a little bit bent so there's not a strain in the elbows. You're just gonna have them lift up into a V and then come back down. So that's, and making sure when they come back down, they're keeping a controlled downward rotation of the scapula, that you're not getting any winging or funny pulling together as you come back down. You can also do, with the weights, a port de bras forward and back in opposition this way. So then they're working the deltoid as they're lifting to the front and the triceps as they're lifting to the back. Sorry, I'm flying through these because we're almost out of time, but hopefully these are not also an exhaustive list of exercises. This is an example of where you guys can start. Doing a plank exercise, making sure that students are really holding the shoulder blades in that out and down position and that they're not winging the scapula up when they're in the plank. Like that, right? We want to make sure the scapula is flat in the spine. So that position can be helpful for training the shoulders, and then also a reverse plank. So this one, helping, again, those like muscles that move the arm to the back and stabilize it that way. Another really important one is in Pilates, I think it's called the swan. My ballet teacher called it the Ferris wheel because there's the sense that you're kind of going up, forward and up around this edge of the Ferris wheel. So it's pulling the mat backwards. You start with the top of the spine. You're going to try to articulate one vertebra at a time, lifting up. And again, while we're in this position, we don't want the shoulders pinching together. We want them to be going wide and down the back and then lengthen down. For students who are really tight in those pec muscles and have a hard time with arching the spine, this exercise is really helpful. Okay, 2 more. We have butterfly arms. So you're laying down and they're gonna reach the arm out, bring it up, and they're just gonna float slightly off the floor. And as they're going up, they're focusing on that upward rotation of the scapula and not elevating the shoulder, and as well as working on that external rotation of the upper arm once they get to the third. So you do it with one arm, and lengthen back down. Second arm, lengthen back down. It's helpful to think of going out as you go up, reaching the arms out, come up, 2 arms, and come back down. So they're just practicing that. That helps to strengthen those muscles. The last one is called thoracic sliding. So you're going to place the arms forward on a slight V and just start totally relaxed. But then you're going to have the students feel that they take the shoulder blades down and out, and they're pulling, there's some resistance with their fingers on the mat. So they pull backwards and then lengthen down. And then they can take one arm up to third position and lengthen down. And the second arm up and lengthen down. And then both arms up and lengthen down. So particularly those last 2 exercises are really helpful when you're trying to train, when you've gotten the stability and we're just training the functionality of the function of the muscles in a ballet class. I forgot one. Really important. For internal and external rotation, you're going to take a TheraBand and tie it to, can tie it to a bar or something like that. And you're going to sit with the elbow right next to your shoulder, your rib cage, elbow next to your rib cage, and then internally rotate this way. And then you're going to do the same with external rotation, rotating out this way. And you would want to do 3 sets of 8 of those on each side as well. Whew, okay, we made it through all of those exercises. Really quick to wrap up, do you guys have any questions about that? Or yeah, comments? Was this helpful to you guys?
This was tremendously helpful. It's something I've wondered a lot about. The shoulders are so complicated, but it really seems like there's very little information about how it functions in ballet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, do you guys, I forgot to share, I'll put it in the chat. I have a list of, oh, now I don't know what's going on. Oh, technology. Okay, I will put it in the chat, my list of resources. And the book Inside Ballet Technique goes through a lot more detail, every muscle, how it works, what the problems are. And so it's a really good resource. Again, Dance Anatomy by Jackie Green is another really good one. And I had one more in there. It's called Dancing Longer and Dancing Stronger. And it has a lot more ideas for exercises as well in there that you guys can look at. So let me copy that really quick.
Well, yeah, thank you, Hannah and Ashley, for coming. So yeah, our next Instructor Insights class is happening on April 19th. And so yeah, we have it every 3rd Monday of the month. So yeah, you can keep your eyes out for that. We have your email, so we'll send out an email about more information when it's coming out. And then this one, because we recorded it, we also send the recording out. It's available for a week, so if you want to watch it again, take more notes, it'll be available to you tomorrow. Yeah, have a good rest of your day, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much. That was really helpful.
Good. I'm glad. Thank you.